I thought I knew him better than anyone else. But then, I found out just how far he'd go to erase me from our lives. The envelope sat on the kitchen counter like a silent grenade, its edges crisp and impersonal. My name was typed neatly in the center. No handwriting, no warmth. The penthouse around me felt foreign all of a sudden, though I'd spent months choosing every detail. The marble countertops, the floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city skyline, even the chandelier above my head. It had been our home once, but now it seemed hollow, as if it already belonged to someone else. My hands trembled as I slid the papers free. Divorce filings. The words blurred together at first, but one phrase jumped off the page like a slap. Irreconcilable differences. Irreconcilable. How could anything be irreconcilable when we'd built this life together? When I'd poured every ounce of myself into making his dreams come true? Memories flooded back unbidden. The early years before success made us strangers. Back then, Ethan was just a man with an idea and a hunger for more. I believed in him so fiercely that I left my own career behind without hesitation. No regrets, I told myself. Together, we were unstoppable. He charmed clients while I managed the chaos behind the scenes. I handled taxes, negotiated contracts, smoothed over disputes with suppliers. He took the stage, shaking hands and accepting praise, while I stayed in the shadows, ensuring the foundation held strong. But loyalty has a cost. Over time, Ethan stopped thanking me. Instead, he started acting like everything good about our company came from him alone. At meetings, he'd dismiss my suggestions with a casual wave of his hand. "Let's table that," he'd say, only to present my ideas later as his own. Once, after a major deal fell through due to faulty projections, a mistake entirely on his part, he blamed me in front of the entire team. "You should have caught that," he snapped, leaving me standing there, cheeks burning, too stunned to defend myself. And now this betrayal wrapped in legal jargon. It wasn't just the divorce papers. As I stood frozen in the kitchen, something else caught my eye, a receipt sticking out from under a stack of mail. Tiffany and Company, dated last week. A bracelet, on our joint account, for her. Her name surfaced in fragments over the past few weeks, whispered by colleagues or muttered during late-night phone calls he thought I couldn't hear. Sarah. Younger, prettier, sharper-edged ambition wrapped in designer dresses. She wasn't just some fling. She was a replacement. Someone who didn't question his decisions or challenge his ego. Someone easier to control than me. Ethan came home that evening smelling of cologne and arrogance. His suit jacket hung loose over his shoulders, and his tie was already loosened, as if he couldn't wait to shed the day. Without looking at me, he said, "You can't stay here anymore." "What?" My voice cracked, barely audible. "You heard me." He avoided my gaze, fiddling with the cufflinks on his sleeves. "You're not handling this well, Claire. You need space. Time to think." "Time to think." I repeated, incredulous. "About what?" "About how you're throwing away 15 years of marriage because you got bored." His jaw tightened. "Don't make this ugly." "Too late for that," I shot back. "How long have you been planning this? Was it before Sarah, or did she seal the deal?" He stiffened at her name, confirming everything I feared. "This isn't about her," he lied. "It's about us. And let's face it, you haven't exactly been easy to live with lately." Easy? After everything I'd done for him? For us? Fury bubbled inside me, hot and sharp, but I swallowed it down. Arguing wouldn't change his mind. Nothing would. By morning I was gone. The movers arrived quietly, packing boxes while Ethan stayed locked in his office, pretending not to notice. Every item I touched felt heavier than it should. The photo albums, the books we'd read together, the stupid little knickknacks I'd picked up on trips we used to cherish. By the time they carted away the last box, exhaustion weighed me down like lead. That night, sitting cross-legged on the floor of my temporary studio apartment, I sorted through the mess. Clothes, paperwork, random junk I hadn't looked at in years. And then I saw it, a manila folder tucked beneath a pile of old tax returns. Curious, I opened it. Deeds, licenses, contracts, all bearing my name. At first, I didn't understand. Then it hit me, the tax loophole we'd exploited years ago, shifting ownership to minimize liabilities. Ethan never cared about the details. He trusted me to handle it. He assumed I'd sign everything back over if it ever mattered. But I hadn't. Not yet. A slow smile spread across my face, cold and calculating. Oh, Ethan, you thought I was nothing, just a cog in your machine. But you didn't realize. I owned everything. The realization settled over me like armor, hard and impenetrable. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than despair. Resolve. Purpose. But what would I do with it? The weight of those documents stayed with me long after I'd closed the folder. My name on every line, every signature, a shield I hadn't even realized I carried. For years, Ethan treated me like a ghost in our marriage, invisible but necessary. Now, it was time to remind him that ghosts don't stay silent forever. I spent the next few days digging through old files, emails, and receipts. Every shred of evidence became ammunition. Proof of his affair, records of frivolous spending on Sarah, contracts he'd signed without consulting me. Each discovery fueled my resolve. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about justice. For myself, yes, but also for every woman who'd been dismissed, underestimated, or erased by men like Ethan. By the end of the week, I had enough dirt to bury him professionally. But first, I needed to cut off his lifeline, the money. Sitting at a borrowed desk in my tiny apartment, I logged into the company accounts. The process was simple. I'd set them up years ago under my name for tax purposes. One by one, I froze the accounts, transferring liquid assets into a private account only I controlled. When I hit confirm on the final transfer, a strange calm settled over me. Power felt different than I expected. Not explosive, but steady like roots sinking deep into the earth. Ethan didn't notice right away. He never paid attention to details unless they directly benefited him. But when he tried to make payroll 2 days later, panic rippled through the office. Phones rang nonstop as vendors demanded answers. Employees complained about missed deposits, and clients questioned whether we were still solvent. By the time Ethan called me, his voice was tight with anger. "What did you do?" he demanded, skipping any pretense of civility. "I'm sorry," I said, coolly leaning back in my chair. "Did something happen?" "Don't play dumb, Claire. The accounts are frozen. You're the only one with access." "Oh, really?" I feigned surprise. "That's odd. Maybe you should have paid more attention to the paperwork you signed, or rather, didn't sign." There was a pause, heavy with disbelief. "You wouldn't dare." "Wouldn't I?" I interrupted, letting a smirk creep into my tone. "Funny how things change when people stop taking you for granted." He hung up before I could say more, but I knew he'd be scrambling now. Good. Let him feel what it's like to have the ground ripped out from under him. While Ethan dealt with the fallout, I moved on to phase 2, public humiliation. Late one night, I drafted an anonymous email to a few key players in the industry, journalists, competitors, former partners, and attached screenshots of Ethan's texts to Sarah, along with copies of questionable financial transactions. Within hours, whispers spread like wildfire. Rumors of infidelity and corruption dogged him everywhere he went. Colleagues avoided eye contact at networking events. Investors pulled out of pending deals. His carefully constructed image crumbled faster than I'd anticipated. But I wasn't done yet. With the help of Rachel, a sharp attorney I'd trusted since college, I filed for alimony and spousal support. Citing abandonment and misuse of marital funds, I requested full custody of our shared business interests. The petition landed on Ethan's desk during a board meeting, forcing him to excuse himself mid-presentation. Watching him squirm gave me a grim sort of satisfaction. At the same time, I began rebuilding. Rebranding the company under my name felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I reached out to former clients, reminding them of the work I'd done behind the scenes, the projects I'd saved, the relationships I'd nurtured. To my surprise, many were eager to collaborate again. Some admitted they'd always suspected Ethan wasn't as brilliant as he claimed. Their validation stung less than I expected. It wasn't about proving myself to them anymore. It was about proving it to me. For the first time in years, I felt alive. Gone was the woman who second-guessed every decision, who dimmed her own light to avoid overshadowing her husband. In her place stood someone stronger, surer, someone who refused to apologize for demanding respect. Ethan, meanwhile, unraveled. His frustration boiled over into recklessness. He started showing up unannounced at my apartment, pounding on the door and shouting accusations until neighbors threatened to call the police. Calls poured in at all hours, alternating between threats and desperate pleas. "We can fix this," he begged. "Just let me explain." Explain what? That he thought I was disposable. That he assumed I'd roll over and accept whatever scraps he threw my way? No. There would be no explanations. Only consequences. Then came the day he finally pieced it together. I'd known it was inevitable. He wasn't stupid, just arrogant. When he showed up at my office unexpectedly, his face was pale, but his eyes burned with fury. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he spat, slamming a folder onto my desk. Inside were printouts of the anonymous emails I'd sent. "This is low even for you." I raised an eyebrow, unfazed. Low? Interesting choice of words, coming from someone who cheated on their spouse and stole from their own company. His hands clenched into fists. "You want to play games? Fine. But don't forget, I know where the bodies are buried too." I leaned forward, meeting his gaze head-on. "Go ahead, Ethan. Try me. Because unlike you, I've got nothing to hide. And unlike you, I've got proof of everything." He froze, realization dawning slowly. Proof. Of course. All those years of trusting me to handle the books, the contracts, the legalities, it had never occurred to him that I might use them against him. His arrogance had blinded him, leaving him completely unprepared for the war I'd already won. As he stood there, speechless, I allowed myself a small smile. "Checkmate," I said softly. And then, just as he opened his mouth to respond, my phone buzzed on the desk. A text notification lit up the screen. One word from Rachel. "It's done." The boardroom smelled like polished wood and stale coffee, the kind of place where fortunes were made or broken with a single vote. Ethan stood at the head of the table, his tailored suit hanging slightly looser on his frame than it had weeks ago. Stress did that to people, or maybe it was guilt. Around him sat our investors, their faces masks of concern as he tried to spin another narrative, another excuse for why the company was crumbling. I chose that moment to walk in. Ethan's jaw tightened when he saw me, but he didn't interrupt his pitch. Instead, he kept talking about restructuring, about weathering this temporary storm. Temporary? I almost laughed. He truly believed he could talk his way out of anything. But today wasn't about him anymore. "Claire," he said sharply when I reached the center of the room. His voice carried an edge of warning, but there was something else beneath it. Fear. "This is a private meeting." "No," I replied calmly, setting my briefcase on the table with a soft thud. "It's not. Not anymore." Every pair of eyes turned toward me. Some looked curious, others wary, but none of them missed the deliberate authority in my tone. I opened the case and pulled out a stack of documents, placing them squarely in front of the lead investor. "These are legal records proving that I own 70% of Montgomery Enterprises," I announced, letting the silence hang heavy in the air. "The properties, trademarks, intellectual property, it's all in my name. Every decision Ethan has made without consulting me violates these agreements." Whispers erupted around the table. Ethan's face flushed red, whether from rage or embarrassment, I couldn't tell, and honestly I didn't care. This was what he deserved. exposure, stripped bare in front of the very people whose approval he craved most. "You're lying," he snapped, his composure cracking. "She's lying." "Oh, am I?" I countered smoothly, pulling out copies of emails detailing his financial misconduct, along with photos of him and Sarah laughing over dinner at some overpriced restaurant. "Care to explain these, Ethan? Or how about the embezzlement charges Rachel filed on my behalf yesterday?" His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The room fell silent again, save for the rustle of papers as the investors flipped through the evidence. One by one, they set the documents down, their expressions hardening. They'd trusted him, invested millions based on his promises, and now they knew they'd been played. Desperation clawed its way into Ethan's voice. "Fine, you win. Take half. Just let me keep something." "Half? After everything he'd done?" My laugh startled even myself. It was sharp, bitter, and utterly devoid of humor. "You really think you're negotiating right now? You took everything from me, my home, my dignity, my trust. Now you get nothing." His control shattered completely. Slamming both fists onto the table, he shouted, "You're destroying me, Claire! Is this what you wanted? To ruin my life?" "Yes," I said simply, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Because you destroyed mine first." If looks could kill, I'd have dropped dead where I stood. But his tantrum only dug his grave deeper. The investors exchanged glances, murmuring amongst themselves before the lead cleared his throat. "Ms. Montgomery, we'll need to discuss next steps, but it's clear who holds the reins here." Ethan staggered back, defeated. For once, he had no words, no charm to fall back on. As the meeting adjourned, he lingered behind, watching helplessly as everyone filed out. When the door clicked shut, leaving us alone, he finally spoke. "This isn't over," he muttered darkly. "It is for you," I replied, gathering my things. And then, because I couldn't resist, I added, "Enjoy bankruptcy." Renaming the company felt symbolic, like erasing the last traces of him from my life. Montgomery Ventures launched under my leadership, a fresh start built on transparency and integrity. I poured every ounce of energy into making it succeed, not for revenge, but for redemption. For myself. Part of that redemption came in the form of a mentorship program aimed at women entrepreneurs. At the inaugural event, I stood before a crowd of eager faces and shared my story, raw and unfiltered. Their applause filled the room, echoing like a promise. They wouldn't make the same mistakes I had. Later that night, sitting alone in my new office, I reflected on everything that had brought me here. For years, I'd let someone else define my worth, shrinking myself to fit into spaces designed to hold me back. Now I knew better. I knew exactly who I was and what I was capable of. As I stared out the window at the city skyline, lit up against the darkness, I found myself wondering, if you were in my shoes, would you have forgiven him or gone further to destroy him?